Art and Alzheimer's, A Creative Search for the Human Self by Reinhold P. Marxhausen with David Morgan. Alzheimer's is a disease whose primary effect is the destruction of its victim's sense of self, a slow and irreversible looting of the treasure of memories accumulated through a lifetime. Such a disease poses a special terror for the civilization that has premised its intellectual and spiritual purpose on the ancient maxim, know thyself, and for a contemporary society widely diagnosed by philosophers, psychologists, sociologists, and theologians as suffering from an increasing alienation from its own past. The unprecedented advances of science and technology, the deterioration of traditional social structures, and fundamental changes in the patterns of religious belief have each contributed to modern society's estrangement from its traditions and history, the storehouses of collective memory that have provided previous ages with so much in the way of self-identity. It is therefore disturbingly appropriate that Alzheimer's should become such a prominently recognized ailment in recent generations. Hiram H., a decorated veteran and once internationally distinguished surgeon, is a man for whom time now stands still. His past of 72 years has gone, and no future awaits him. He is a prisoner of each passing moment, confined to the boundaries of the present that hem him in, like the walls of his house. His loving wife devotes each day to this gentle, happy man who would wander off if it were not for her constant vigilance. When I met Hiram, worked with him, spoke with him, listened to his meandering comments, and observed his frequent gestures and his sporadic answers to unasked questions, I wondered where Hiram might be. Was he lost somewhere between broken junctures of brain cells? Did he still possess some feeling, some emotion? Was he yet capable of love and desire, of any decisive, willful act that might express some remaining sense of self? Or was Hiram simply gone? As an artist and art educator, I asked myself, in Hiram's world, where he no longer mattered much, what activity, what creative act could produce in him the sensation that he does exist, that he still matters? Originally invited to work with Hiram and other disabled subjects making watercolors, it was not long before I wanted to conduct a series of informal experiments with Hiram, using further artistic activities. With his wife's permission, I offered Hiram a number of creative exercises designed to help me answer my questions about Hiram's self, about the human self. If memory cells from certain regions of the brain, which contain the store of life's information, are destroyed, is it the case that all sense of personal identity is likewise eradicated? Could it be that vestiges of self remain encoded in parts of the mind which have not yet been affected? Or that remnants of identity could be unlocked or unearthed, which were previously hidden beneath higher, more dominant strata of the personality, which have now eroded away? How should I say this? The following is a series of notes based on observations recorded throughout the period of work with Hiram. These notes document the stages of our experience together and the small but remarkable discoveries we made. We began simply by making lines on the page with watercolor. First, we tried zigzag lines, which Hiram was able to do extremely well. He filled page after page with angular movements of the wrist, replicating the line's shape over and over. I was so impressed with his concentration and technical finesse that we moved on to more exacting tasks. I taught Hiram to make X's and O's. He had great difficulty with these at first, particularly the X's. But eventually, Hiram completed a series of exercises using lines, circles, and X's in which he displayed a singular degree of freehand precision. He responded enthusiastically to the regular patterns of this exercise and arranged the components without a feeling of randomness, filling up the page with complete awareness of its format. I was struck by Hiram's desire to avoid spontaneous kinds of actions. When I made a series of random dots on a page, he responded with a series of carefully placed dots arranged in rows or another kind of system. From making lines, we went to making shapes. After he drew lines in magic marker, I asked Hiram to cut them out with scissors. This he did with great skill, even flinching when the scissors took a nick out of the line. Encouraged by this mechanical proficiency, and recalling Hiram's profession as a surgeon, I introduced him to stitchery. I showed him how to push the needle and thread through the fabric. He responded immediately and was able to repeat the exercise quite skillfully. In order to focus this activity, I drew long red lines on the cloth, which he proceeded to stitch up at once. This kept him occupied for extended periods of time, generally from 10 to 15 minutes. The act of sewing seemed to recall old memories from Hiram's wartime experience. One day, as he stitched, his eyes glazed over, and he uttered several phrases, among which was, "They needed help. They were really bad." He made several embroideries and then quit, with the appearance of having lost interest in it. Hiram and I often sat and worked together using a large piece of paper and magic markers. We each had a different color. I began by working on my side of the paper and encouraged him to work on his side by copying what I did. I urged him to take liberties and make innovations. He enjoyed the exercise, the attention, and the companionship. Occasionally, Hiram would write words on his drawings. He wrote quickly, energetically, and even aggressively. The words appeared in brief spurts of concentrated effort. After writing them, Hiram gazed in surprise, apparently wondering where they came from. Each word had the appearance of cursive script, but was in fact rarely legible. I noticed how fascinated he was with this activity. We turned to concentrate entirely on writing. I gave Hiram a piece of typing paper and asked him to write. He began at the top and covered the page with neat lines of script. He often paused as if considering what to say. His body became tense as he wrote, as if possessed with a momentary power which I could not help but wonder might be the lingering spirit of Hiram. Afterward, he seemed quite satisfied with himself and was so exhausted that he took a nap. Between my weekly visits during this period, his wife encouraged him to write at least one page each day. One day, as I left the house with a stack of Hiram's writings under my arm, he pointed to them and startled me with the statement, "Those are mine." These words were coming from somewhere, from someone, from Hiram. In a world of indifferent and momentary objects, Hiram was identifying something as belonging to himself. When I returned, a week later, bringing with me these pages, Hiram astonished me once again by repeating the phrase, plainly evincing a memory that spanned an entire week. The author of 27 scholarly publications, Hiram clearly preferred writing to the other manual activities we pursued. Early one day when he finished cutting and gluing paper, Hiram wanted to write. He filled an entire page with his word-like scribbles and, like a shy child presenting a gift to its mother, walked up behind me and gave me the page, saying, "I want to give you something." I accepted the gift with appreciation. As we walked up the basement steps, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I like you. You are good." Not long after this, Hiram took pen and paper in hand, looked quizzically into the distance, and asked aloud, "How should I say this?" Then he poured out a page of script as if in a surge of poetic inspiration. In the final phase of our work together, I increased the difficulty of Hiram's exercises. I had observed that he made few decisions in his daily life. I set about urging him to make more in the creative context of making collages. I drew random lines on sheets of construction paper. Hiram cut out the resulting shapes. He applied glue to the back of one piece, and at my request to place it somewhere on a separate sheet, did so. This first piece was easy for him since it required very little decision-making. However, the difficulty increased with each additional shape. Hiram obviously perceived that the pieces placed on or near another related, and that their relationship was visually important. As the collage progressed, he became more and more anxious. The final pieces required the longest and most anguished deliberation. He ran his fingertips along the edges of previous pieces, matched edges and shapes, and repeatedly looked to me for help. I resisted his pleas for assistance and urged him to execute the decisions himself. By the time he finished, he was exhausted. But his achievement seems worth the difficulty. Each collage is the result of numerous cumulative decisions. The products themselves demonstrate the sensitivity with which he executed the task. He paid a good deal of attention to positive and negative shapes, alternating tones and colors, and overall placement of forms on the page. In Search of Self. Hiram's work offers an opportunity for reflection on the state of his personal identity and what it was that occurred between us. His example should encourage the use of art in daily care for Alzheimer's patients. Hiram was fully capable of executing a variety of visual exercises which challenged and engaged him in a series of formal problems. The mechanical skills he exhibited in cutting and sewing were in no way inferior to the same skills in most normal adults of his age. His technical precision in drawing was in fact superior to most. Moreover, his collages are truly outstanding pieces of design. Hiram's writing presents a fascinating case. At first glance, it appears quite legible. Individual words are clearly readable, and even brief passages congeal into fragments of meaningful grammar. His script resembles the arcane cipher every doctor scribbles off to the pharmacist. However, upon closer examination, the text becomes a rush of word-like scrawls, the mechanical residue of a life of writing. Still, it is difficult to overcome the desire to hear a speaker in these confused and hurried strokes. Recurring several times on one page is the single capital I. Is this floating pronoun the ghost of a self, a mere shadow, a random firing of remaining neurons? Hiram's enthusiasm for writing suggests otherwise. Furthermore, it was a stack of his writings which he identified as his own and which he remembered as his own a week later. What better proof is there for the existence of Hiram than the willful assertion of ownership over the product of his own labor? These pages of writing are the documents of his creative agency. They are artifacts of a soul, evidence of the remaining ability to exert his own will over himself and the physical world in order to establish his presence here among us. Expression and representation. In addition to his memories, Hiram has lost to his disease the ability to recognize signs and symbols. He is unable to remember what they mean. With this loss goes a substantial portion of his capacity for communication. Yet I believe that he has not yet lost all ability to communicate. Although he is almost entirely unable to represent thoughts in the abstract forms of signs, he is able to express certain affections and feelings. Expression does not require conceptually encoded signs because it relies on the use of signals. The function of these signals is not to formulate the abstract propositions of which representation consists, but to convey subjective states of being. Expressive signals establish and sustain a particular relationship between the expressor and a fellow. As an act of communication, expression presupposes a self who seeks relatedness, companionship, presence among others. The act of expression becomes an opportunity for personal encounter, a provision for selfhood. This creative encounter, in fact, draws two selves out to meet one another. The collages depict a series of compositional choices which Hiram was compelled to make on his own. Each edition constituted a more sophisticated visual task which served no function but a purely creative, artistic one. The total result was a sustained exercise of will. As an act of expression, each collage created a relationship not only between Hiram and me, but also between Hiram and himself. His precise yet impatient character is imprinted on each of his projects. I even found that the exercises needed to be tailored to Hiram's aptitude and personality. While he responded very well to writing and drawing, he was completely confused by clay, unable to form even the most basic shapes. Hiram quickly became uncomfortable with the texture, and we experimented with it no further. My work with Hiram has reminded me that the human self is a profound presence that resonates throughout the countless layers of an individual's mental and emotional history. As these are lost to Alzheimer's disease, The self gradually erodes until it vanishes and the patient finally dies. But before that happens, there remains an increasingly childlike person for whom loved ones must care. The artistic experiences I have discussed do not arrest the progression of Alzheimer's, but they offer the family, healthcare professionals, and the patient a creative means of coping with it. Perhaps we as a society would be less disabled dealing with Alzheimer's patients if we would view their disease as a sort of second childhood in which creative play could assume a prominent role. Scribbling, cutting, painting, pasting, and constructing are the sorts of activities that facilitate the emergence of personality in children. These creative acts engage powers of the self which are primitive, even primordial, yet are vital parts of our humanity. As the creative act of expression, art has something important to contribute to our being and to the humanity of other Hirams, whose struggle deserves all the inspiration and creativity we can offer it.